Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. February is in full effect as a new month brings plenty of sports topics, news, and discussion for me to unpack, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now we could begin the countdown, the march to Super Bowl 60, as we still have to wait 6 days. But you know what? Now we're on the other side of this 2-week transition where we'll start to get all the quotes coming in. Media Day, I believe it's tonight. It used to be on Tuesday, but now I believe it's a media night. They actually make it an event when it comes to the players, coaches, etc., meeting with the media there in San Francisco. I don't know if it's going to be where at the stadium or if it's going to be at the Chase Center. Who knows? But we could finally start to zero in and lock in on what is going to take place with all of the predictions, all the analysis, the breakdown, which I'm going to save for Thursday's podcast. So you don't have to worry about that. I'll unpack the game itself more so Thursday than I will right now. But as far as today goes, the top storylines, and to me, I still haven't gotten geeked up over this game just yet. And I know that it's the rematch now of the franchises. Obviously, you're not going to have the cast of characters, but when you think about 11 years ago, Super Bowl 49, and how crazy that ending was, the controversial play call there at the goal line where all they had to do was just hand it off to Marshawn Lynch, who on first down, I believe, got 6 yards to get to the 1, and then the inexplicable pass that was deflected or really intercepted there by Malcolm Butler that made him a Super Bowl hero. And I understand you're going to see a lot of that if you haven't already seen that or heard it. The Jermaine Kearse catch, which set up the first and goal, the run there by Marshawn Lynch, etc., and the boneheaded play call by Pete Carroll. I'm sure you're going to get that until you're blue in the face. But when it comes to the actual game itself, there really isn't a lot to wrap your arms around. Yes, we could talk about Seattle's defense. Yes, we could talk about their trajectory getting here as a team that has just pretty much had a big-time year. A lot of people didn't think Seattle was going to be one in the whole NFC when it comes to them getting to a Super Bowl. People thought they were good, but they didn't think they were this good. First and foremost, the big storyline has to be Sam Darnold, and I can't even imagine the amount of pressure that's going to be on his shoulders to not only play well in this game, but to deliver this team a Super Bowl victory, to kind of erase what happened there 11 years ago. I get it, no Pete Carroll, no Bill Belichick, no Tom Brady, no Russell Wilson, but still, I would think that the Pacific Northwest and Seattle, they want their revenge. They want to at least look at this matchup and know that they have a, maybe not sizable, but a solid favorite and a team that we would think on paper are built to win the Super Bowl. And there isn't any way, shape, form about it. And to know that Sam Darnold, and we know about his whole career, first round pick there by the Jets in 2018, not working out there, whether it was with Todd Bowles or even Adam Gase. Him, for all intents and purposes, I believe he got released. Then he go to Carolina. I don't think he got traded there because they did not pick up his option after his rookie contract. So he went to Carolina, was an understudy there for, of all people, Baker Mayfield, who was in that same draft. Then you had a scenario where he went from Carolina and pretty much bounced around. San Francisco, Minnesota, had a big year last year, winning 13 games. We saw what happened there, those last 2 games of the regular season. And then here, he is right now going to be the spotlight front and center as a guy that's going to be a big cog in this wheel to see whether or not the Seahawks win another Super Bowl. And that's where storyline number 1 is. And the second storyline happens to be the team itself, the Patriots, because who would have thought that after once Bill Belichick left and then you had Gerard Mayo, they win 4 games. Yes, they were able to draft Drake May the year before that. And of course had his growing pains there last year, which was expected. But now in year 2 has risen to the point where he is an MVP candidate for the league. The MVP, which will be announced later on this week with the whole NFL honors situation. But for them to arrive, and maybe a year early, I understand Mike Vrabel, the coach, who after his years in Tennessee, once he was available, Robert Kraft said, bye-bye Gerard Mayo, and let's bring in the former linebacker who had won Super Bowls with that team in the first go-around back in the 2000s. He wasn't a part of the 20-teens in those years, but for Vrabel to, we'll say in this case, for him to come home to coach this team, and yes, we could talk about the soft schedule. Yes, we could talk about pretty much I don't want to say it's a cakewalk, but let's face it. They did not face any landmines throughout this postseason, and I understand that they had a 2-seed and they had 2 games in their building, but they didn't have to face the Bills. They didn't have to face the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't have to face even a team like the Baltimore Ravens when Lamar Jackson was winning MVPs and doing very well as far as their teams being successful. So yeah, it has been maybe not a painted picture to where it was rose-petaled and a red carpet, but certainly not a lot of bumps and bruises, not a lot of big-time potholes and detours in order for them to say, wow. Now, did they earn it? Yes, but wow from the standpoint of they went through the gauntlet. So you got to call it like you see it. And you have to think, are the Patriots back? Let me see them follow up next year with a year similar to this one, and then we'll say they're back. Yes, we could say from the standpoint of, the Belichick era is now gone. Now the new era has begun with the quarterback and head coach. All right, you want to say that, but let's wait a few years before you can say that they're actually back, because when you had off years in Kansas City, obviously a down year in Baltimore, Buffalo didn't make it past the second round, and that would have been a very intriguing AFC Championship game if that were to be, if Buffalo did their job in Denver, and then you would have had a situation where that game would have been in Foxborough. But, hey, right now, you can't quibble about what the route to getting to a Super Bowl is. You got to give them credit. They earned it, and they're here. And besides that, now, can I get into like small storylines, whether that's a player like Stephon Diggs who's bounced around, and obviously he's a big personality, not a top personality in the sport, but people know who Stephon Diggs is based on his playing days in Minnesota, then obviously Buffalo, went to Houston, and now here he is in New England. And he's one step closer to winning a Super Bowl. We can talk about the Seahawks, their new Legion of Boom 2.0, as we'll get to see them up close and personal there on a grand stage. We could talk about JSN, the other receiver who's, I don't want to say he's underrated, he is not, but a lot of people don't know who JSN, that being Jackson Smith and Jigba, the big-time wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks. And yeah, there's not a lot of big-time personalities that are in the Super Bowl, where when you go back to Super Bowl 49, obviously with the Patriots, we already know who those cast of characters are, but at least with the Seahawks, you had them going for back-to-back. The year before, they won against the Broncos in Super Bowl 48. They had Russell Wilson, they had the Legion of Boom, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman. You also had guys like that, the safety there, Earl Thomas. So there were guys on the team that you knew that were coming back to see if they could repeat, and had some maybe not big-time offensive players, which they didn't. When we take a look at what they had there, listen, I mentioned Jermaine Kearse in my live stream this morning. Obviously, every Monday and Thursday, 9:30 and 9:45, in the 9:30 to 10 o'clock window. Hop on board, and if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, please do so. I put up a couple of vlogs that you want to check out there just recently. I'm actually wearing, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, yesterday was the anniversary of the last Steeler championship, Super Bowl 43, Santonio Holmes' catch. So definitely check that out. You can just go to the channel, subscribe, and watch it there. But there isn't really a lot to grasp when it comes to what is happening with the Super Bowl storylines. There just isn't. Now, one thing's for sure, that this is the last game for Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator of the Seahawks, as he'll be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, and that certainly could be a significant hiring, considering that they have the number 1 pick. In all likelihood, they're going to draft Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback out of Indiana, who just came off winning a national championship. So Kubiak and what he's done there under Mike Macdonald, the head coach of the Seahawks, who knows? what kind of game plan he's going to draw up. This is his last go-around. I'm sure he's going to pull out all the stops, whatever that may be. So that is a storyline I guess you could look at, but not a lot of people know who Clint Kubiak is unless you're a dyed-in-the-wool NFL fan or just a big-time football fan. So when we have these storylines, unless something crops up where, not to say there's going to be bulletin board material or any trash talking, but unless something pops up here over the next couple of days and will be brought up on Thursday, then all right, now we may have something to sink our teeth into. But we would think that it's going to be just the usual, hey, we respect them, hey, they're a good team, hey, they got here for a reason, yada, yada, yada. And yeah, we'll just wait for kickoff Sunday at around 6:40 p.m. Eastern time. Hopefully that'll be it, because I believe last couple of years the game started 6:45. And if you're on the East Coast, you want this game over before 10 o'clock. Because you're not just waiting for the game to end. You're going to watch the post game. You're going to watch who's going to win the MVP, the podium, etc. And before you know it, it's 11:15 and you're cleaning up your kitchen and your living room and so on and so forth. You're not getting in bed till midnight. This is why I wish I was on the West Coast, or even Hawaii for that matter, because the game in Hawaii would start around 12:45. So by the time the game is over, the sun is still out. Where on the West Coast, obviously it's a little bit more manageable, to where once everything is all wrapped up, it's 8 p.m. Obviously, I can deal with that more so than 11 o'clock as I'm trying to wind down from this. Well, anyway, that's more of a personal note. But there aren't a lot of angles, storylines, other than the ones I just gave you. Because let's face it, I understand you can say, oh, Drake May, second-year quarterback. Well, yeah, but he's second year. And I understand the comparisons to Dan Marino. Oh, he was in his second year. But come on. Drake May did not come out. Granted, he was a third overall pick, and Marino was a first-round pick, but he was drafted, I believe, in the 20s by the Dolphins, maybe late teens. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but Marino has had 2 killer seasons leading up to that Super Bowl, where May, I understand he's an MVP candidate, but he's got time. You know, he's not a world beater. He's not blazing a trail to where Marino did, where he was setting records for touchdown passes and yards thrown in an NFL that we thought we'd never even see or imagine. And obviously there's guys that throw for 5,000 yards in their sleep, where Marino did it, and that record wasn't broken for at least 30 years. So that's why I'm not looking at Drake May as a guy like, whoa. Now I understand he's going to be a guy that is highlighted, a guy that has 2 years ago was in college, and now he's playing in a Super Bowl for a team that's looking for their 7th Super Bowl. And I guess that's another storyline, which would be an NFL record. They're tied currently with my beloved Steelers. But yeah, this isn't a Super Bowl, a game that A, I haven't been able to wrap my arms around, and B, not a lot of storylines to really tickle your fancy. I'll just use that term. I understand it's like an old term that's kind of, archaic, but you understand where I'm coming from. So that's what we have with the storylines. And for the game, we'll talk about it more on Thursday's podcast. As you know, I'll break it down, give you a prediction, etc. Now, as far as the off-the-news stuff, off the field, one of the things I want to talk about is the Seahawks. And yeah, you're going to say, well, JAYREELZ, you're going to go back to the Seahawks? Well, after this game, they're going to be sold. They're going to be for sale, I should say. And we know that Paul Allen owned the team, one of the Microsoft founders, and it has been left to, I believe, his sister. And now they're at a point where they're ready to sell. And you know what? We've seen this with a bunch of other organizations. The Lakers selling theirs for $10 billion. The Celtics, coming off a championship 2 years ago, sold their franchise to Bill Chisholm for $6.1 billion. We've seen the Broncos just recently sell their team to the Walton estate, or the Walton family, I should say. So a lot of these organizations are willing to sell now because they know that, hey, it's not going to get any better than this. And the Seahawks right now, they got to be worth, considering they're going to come off a Super Bowl, whether win or no win, they have to be worth $6 to $8 billion. I understand they're not the Cowboys. I understand they're not the Packers. I understand they're not the Steelers or a cornerstone franchise in the sport, but they're still worth a gazillion amount of dollars. And whatever the sister, I can't think of her name right at the moment, but her siblings, their family, they're going to rake in a ton of dough and back up the truck and be out on their merry way. And you know what? I can't look at them and say, oh, you're nuts. But no, they're getting out when the getting is good. And you know what? Good for them. So we'll see what prospective owner comes to buy this team, whether it's going to be the young hotshot guy, a hedge fund / private equity / real estate, whatever it may be. And hopefully they don't turn that Seahawks franchise and burn it to the ground. Because as we've seen, the David Teppers of the world, and although they made the playoffs and there's some bright spots there, but they want to go in there, flex their muscles, thinking that they know so much about business, but the NFL is a different beast altogether. So I just had to throw that out there. And speaking of owners, I'm just going to go there before I get to the coaches. If you're a Giant fan today, and when you saw the reports, I believe on Friday, where one of your owners, Steve Tisch, who's a big Hollywood guy, and we know about the Maras, John Mara and the brother Chris, and they've owned the family forever, dating back to Wellington Mara. It's family-owned business. But when you see Steve Tisch is part of, I guess, a long list tied into Jeffrey Epstein, I'm sure when you saw that, you spit out your Cheerios or your cappuccino or your toasted bagel with butter and jelly. And I have to say, based on some of the things that I've read with emails and correspondence in that nature, it doesn't look good for Steve Tisch. And I don't know if it's a situation where Roger Goodell has to step in. I don't know if the fan base is that outraged. I haven't really heard much as far as them thinking like, wait a minute, this guy is tied in with the Jeffrey Epstein and all that has gone on with him. Who knows? I understand we live in a day and age being politically correct and so on and so forth. Now listen, you could dislike it and it's distasteful, etc. I mean, when I read that, some of the things that were written, I said, oh my goodness. Does this guy even survive? Is he going to have to sell his half or his portion of the organization? Maybe the Maras fully buy in. Who knows? I don't know what their money situation is. I mean, listen, I don't think it's anywhere close to what Robert Kraft or Jerry Jones. Not to say the Giants are broke or poor, but again, when you have a family, look at the Rooneys. They've been around forever too, but I'm sure they're not up to their eyeballs and beyond in money. That's not to say that they're in the outhouse, but my point is, you wonder whether or not that there's going to maybe be a change there, whether that means that the fans stand by them and whether they get their season tickets, say, yeah, I'm not renewing them this year or anything like that, or does Roger Goodell step in and say, hey, now, who knows? But all I'll say is this. If all that stuff is true, and based on what we've seen here in recent memory with a lot of these owners, whether it's the Jerry Richardsons of Carolina, whether it's now in basketball, Donald Sterling, and yeah, to be a part of that, and we know how controversial that is, you would have to think that his days as a Giant owner are starting to dwindle. And I'll just leave it at that. Then with the coaches, I talked about Clint Kubiak. Good hire there. The Arizona Cardinals, who had Kubiak on their radar, but they hire Mike LaFleur, Matt LaFleur's brother, the former offensive coordinator for the Rams. Now he's the Cardinal coach. So we'll see how the Cardinals do there with their new, should I say skipper? You think about that in baseball. And then the Niners hired Raheem Morris, known not to be the coach, but the defensive coordinator, of course, with the departed Robert Saleh in Tennessee. And that's what you have there with the football. You're not going to get any acquisitions, nothing like that. I know the Steelers have also talked about their defense coordinator, got from the Raiders, their Graham. Nothing really to get into there, but I'll just leave it at that. Maybe I'll bring it up some other time. But I want to move on to other things because the next thing I'm going to talk about, a little bit of a twist. I usually save for the end, but I want to talk about this now as I break up my tennis racket and lace up my tennis shoes because the Australian Open has now concluded. And I'll get to the women's side. I know Elena Rybakina beat Aryna Sabalenka. And Sabalenka, I know that's a tough loss for her, but I'll touch on that in a moment. But with the tennis, you had not great tennis. You had stupendous tennis on the men's side when it comes to the semifinals. And then, of course, the final there which was very good. It wasn't great. It didn't get to a fifth set, which we were hoping for, especially after Novak Djokovic won the first set. But I have to go back to the semifinals because when you had Carlos Alcaraz in the first of two go up against Alexander Zverev, and you had Alcaraz win the first two sets, the second one in a tiebreak, and you're thinking, all right, well, he's going to make quick work of Zverev. And then Zverev comes back in the third and fourth sets, wins both of those on tiebreakers as well. And then the fifth set, for all intents and purposes, goes to a tiebreak because you had Alcaraz up 6-5, and of course, you had to get to a point where Zverev, if you would have tied, you would have had a fourth tie-breaking set. But Alcaraz was in control at that point, 5.5 hours, 5-set marathon, to where he had to battle cramp, leg injuries, and just gutted it out. And Zverev was game. Zverev, who is a top player, ranked number 3 in the world, but cannot get over the hump. Oh, he's ranked third because Djokovic is fourth. Couldn't get over that hump, and that would have been a monumental. I mean, that would have been, for Zverev to have come back and won that match, that would have been a big knock on Alcaraz because he was up 2-love and could have put him away there. And it was a situation where getting into that fifth set and with him, I don't want to say he was breaking down, but him just getting exhausted and his legs certainly not cooperating. For a second there, I thought, I was like, oh, if Alcaraz loses this is going to be I don't want to go as far as saying a black mark, but this is one that's going to raise an eyebrow, on whether or not he can win down under. Because remember, he had not won a Grand Slam there at Melbourne. We know he's won in Paris. He's won, obviously, here in New York and at the All England Club there in London. But he was able to outlast. He was able to gut it out and won that final set 7-5. And just when you thought that was a great semifinal match, the Jannik Sinner and Novak Djokovic say, hey, hold my beer, or hold my Fosters down in Australia. Sinner goes up 2-1, and mind you, he's the back-to-back two-time defending champ. And for Novak Djokovic, 38, I think he'll be 39 this year. For him to come back the way he did, and I understand there were people getting on Sinner, oh, I can't believe he lost to this guy, blah, 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 and people like if Djokovic was chopped liver. And listen, you can't get on Sinner. I understand that he was going for a three-peat. I get it. He was up 2-1, and it was a situation where he had Djokovic on the ropes, but he bounced back, won the fourth set, and then wins the fifth. I mean, when I saw that, I couldn't believe it because I thought Sinner was going to win this match. And I understand people could look at the Alcaraz-Djokovic match as one that a lot of people weren't expecting. They were looking for another Alcaraz-Sinner, considering that they've played in the last 3, dating back to last year. 3 in a row, that is. So it was French, Wimbledon, and U.S. Open. And for Sinner not to get there, listen, he was going to lose at some point. Why not to the aging all-time great in a one Novak Djokovic? But how I looked at that after him winning that match, I thought to myself, I said, now Alcaraz got the break of all time. Because even if Sinner would have won a 5-set match, it would have been a scenario where Sinner has won there twice, Alcaraz hasn't won there, and he was going to go for a three-peat with the 5.5-hour match. Now, granted that this match went 5, and let's say if Sinner did win that final set, yeah, he would have been sore. Yeah, he would have been nicked up a little bit. But considering that Alcaraz had to really work hard, playing from ahead, that I thought it would have been a little bit more mentally taxing for him to bounce back. Granted that he had the earlier match, and I thought he would have lost to Sinner. But obviously that's moot. I can't kill Sinner for losing this match. Djokovic still has some gas left in the tank. And let me tell you something. After that first, and I didn't see it live, of course, because early in the morning there, it was 3:30 in the morning here in New York when the match was taking place down there. And after Djokovic won the first set, I said, whoa, I got to see what happened here. So, of course, you're watching highlights, you're watching what happened. And to me, that's what set Alcaraz off, because that's when he turned it around. He realized that, all right, I lost the first set. I can't fall behind 2. He knows his body better than anybody. Obviously, he has a new coach, new team there with him. And I knew he was hungry to win this match. He was dominant throughout. And even though he won those first 2 sets there against Zverev, and despite the fact that he hung on there for dear life, I mean, let's face it. But for him to have the resiliency. And the thing about Alcaraz that makes him an all-time great already, and I know that may sound even controversial considering he's 22 years of age, etc., and I'm going to get to all those things in a minute. But knowing that this guy's game is a combination of everything. The guy has power to his game. The guy has finesse. The guy has athleticism. The guy can play no matter what type of game. He's not a guy that's just based on a hard serve and a hard volley. No, he could drop shot you to death. He could play soft. He could have that touch. He could play around the net. The guy does everything. And the athleticism. It doesn't matter the surface. On the clay, he can slide across the court. On the grass, he pretty much does the same thing. On the hard court, we've seen him win at the U.S. Open. And now what you see here at Melbourne, again, another hard surface. But it doesn't matter. The guy has no weaknesses. If there's any weakness with Alcaraz, you could say it could be his health. Because there have been times where he hasn't succeeded, and also between his ears. Because in those matches that he hadn't won down under, and some of the other matches in between where you question whether or not his grit, his fortitude, well, he showed that here. He was down already 1 set, and he came back to win the last 3 sets. And not to say he was dominant, because Djokovic did have his moments, but you already knew that after that first set, he wasn't playing. And that's what I got out from watching the highlight. And listen, I could break down points, etc. I know I got some other things to get to, but just to give you an encapsulation, and I pretty much said it, but to know that he was able to turn it on at that point. And that's the danger of it too, because when you're that young and you have all that ability, you could just think I could just go out there with my tennis racket and that's it. No, he knew that based on what happened in the previous match, him leading and then having to fight for his dear life, and then knowing that he was down 0-1, he's like, I cannot take any games off. Forget about sets. And he did what he did in order for him to get his first ever Australian Open win. He gets his career Grand Slam at 22 years of age. Historic. And this is where I bring up the question, which I understand to some people, especially the tennis people, and I would think that the tennis people would probably even have to say this. Is he already an all-time great player? Now, we understand that if he retired today, which obviously he's not, he'd already be in the Hall of Fame because of the level of dominance that he's had here over this 4-year span. And he's been in, 8 Grand Slam finals, and he's won 7 of 8. The one loss that he had was at Wimbledon to Sinner last year. And, no, you're right, it was Sinner because Alcaraz won the French and he won the U.S. Open. And for him to have this display where 7 Grand Slams, John McEnroe won 7 Grand Slams in his career. And a lot of them, people may not consider him to be an all-time great, but we understand that he is, of his era, a top-flight player. But he's 22. Do the math, people. 10 years from now when he's 32 and he's going to have now, let's even include this one. So between now and when he's 32, he's going to have 39 more of these matches. Oh, you know what? We'll have to include the Australian because let's say this time, 10 years from now, he's going to have 40 more opportunities to win Grand Slam majors. What if he wins a quarter of them? That's 10. That means 17. Chances are he may win more than that because when you look at the tour, it is he, Jannik Sinner. Djokovic is going to be, I would think, maybe after this year, that could be it. Maybe. And we could talk about the Alexander Zverevs, the Daniil Medvedevs, the Casper Runas, the Taylor Fritzes, the Ben Sheltons. We could talk about all those guys. Those guys aren't in anywhere near the stratosphere of Alcaraz and Sinner. So if you take those 40, and who knows who's coming up the ranks, hopefully we get some guys that will certainly be in contention year in, year out, other than Sinner and Alcaraz, but he has a shot to maybe, and this is, I don't even think this is even fathomable, but he could win 15 to 20 of these over the next 10 years. That's almost half. And if he wins 15, that's 22. And dare I even say, if he wins 20 of these, if he wins half of these Grand Slams between now and the year 2036, he's an all-time great. He'll have 27 Grand Slam wins, which will be by far number one, men's and women's overall. That's more than Margaret Court. That's more than Serena Williams. And of course, that's going to be more than Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, etc. As it is, Djokovic's at 24, tied with Margaret Court, and I believe Serena has 24 as well. So the guy's already an all-time great. Even if he gets to 20, he's going to be an all-time great. Pete Sampras, who was the standard before the Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic trio came into play. And what does Sampras have? 14, 15? And people thought that that was going to be hard to beat. And those guys blew by Sampras standing still. And you have to think, Alcaraz is already halfway to, or just about, to Pete Sampras. That's why I already could consider him an all-time great. That the only thing that's going to stop him is his health and what's between his ears. Because we saw what we've seen is in his chest just these last two matches. But the only thing that's going to slow him down or stop him is him. That's it. Congratulations, Carlos Alcaraz, in his Australian Open win. And as far as the women's side goes, Sabalenka, I'm sure, and I got to be honest, I didn't see the highlights of this. I saw a couple of, but I didn't go full bore as I did with these matches with the men's side. But they split their first two sets, and Sabalenka had a 3-love lead in the third set, and she dropped 6 of the next 7 games to lose 6-4. And the thing about Sabalenka, and I love her as a tennis player, but I truly thought that up 3-love, you're thinking, oh, this is probably going to be maybe 6-3 tops, maybe 6-2. I didn't think it was going to be 6-love, but for Rybakina to dig deep and for her to match point for point and even surpass and outlast her to win that final set 6-4, I mean, that's just a testament to her play. I don't want to fault Sabalenka. We know Sabalenka, sometimes she gets in her own head and she just goes off the rails. But give it up. Rybakina did a masterful job and had a masterful job throughout. She beat the top 2 seeded women, beating Iga Świątek, as you know. And that hasn't been done in a long time. I can't even remember. I have to go back and look to see who the last person was to beat the top 2 seeds in an Australian Open. And I'm looking at this here with the Saints. They're going to play the NFL's first game in Paris next year. Of course, the Saints, Fleur de Lis. Makes sense, right? But when you have a player like Sabalenka of her ilk, number 1 player of the year, and for her to be up 3-love, I'm sure she did not sleep well and probably hasn't slept since then. And again, I don't know how many unforced errors. Bad job on my part. But when there are a couple of highlights I have seen and how she's able to respond, and of course, some of the stuff that I've read, it's just a testament to how she played there in that last set, knowing that, she didn't go out like that, and she certainly not only held serve, but did more than that in order for him to win this Australian Open. And for Rybakina, she's ranked 5th in the world. I think that would probably bring her up to maybe 3. Which, let me just look that up real quick. And Rybakina, I know she was obviously very gracious in the post-match. And for her to also, she beat Jessica Pegula as well. Świątek along the way. And, where's it not coming up? Yeah, she's currently ranked number 3 right now. So, kudos. Just a stupendous job. As now we get to wait a few months before we get to the next major tournament, which will be the French Open there at Roland Garros in Paris, there in the middle to late part of May. All right, now let me lace up the high tops, go through the association. Got a few things cooking there, which is good because the trade deadline will be this coming Friday. So, oh no, I'm sorry, that'll be on Thursday. I take that back. So whatever trades are going to take place, I'll be on top of. I know you've had a couple. DeAndre Hunter going from the Cavs for Dennis Schrader and Keon Ellis. I know that they pretty much got some tax relief there on their payroll by trading Hunter to Sacramento. But Schrader will provide some defense, some toughness, a guy that's an irrational confidence guy. And Keon Ellis will do the same, a little defense too. But the Cavs were trying to find their way there in the East, as we know, amongst the likes of the Pistons, Celtics, Knicks, and I'll get to the Knicks in a moment. But we shall see what's going to happen here as far as the four biggest questions. I'm going to get to that in a minute. The scenario regarding the trade deadline, nothing else has really come down the pike, but I'm sure that there'll be a trade or two along the way. Definitely check the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ for any up-to-the-minute trades, whether they're big, small. Probably won't expect anything too big, but I'll be on top of it, and I'll share my thoughts there on the YouTube channel. But, I had Nikola Jokic come back Friday night after the hyperextended knee, 31-12. Didn't even miss a beat. They beat the Clippers. They lose last night to OKC, where he was pretty pedestrian for him. But good to see Nikola Jokic back. Hopefully he remains healthy throughout the remainder of this regular season. Nuggets obviously going to need him. Now, they were 10-6 without him, which was a pretty good record. Now, I don't know what teams they played with along the way, but you got to like that, knowing that they could play without their MVP and big man. But hopefully the injury bug is behind them, and he's been relatively healthy throughout the course of his career. This is the longest extended period that he's been out in a regular season. So hopefully, fingers crossed for an NBA fan, that is the last of it, that you're going to see him play a lot more moving forward. He'll have the All-Star break, which is in about 10 days or so, and I'm sure he's been elected. He'll be in the game. He'll probably get limited minutes. I'm sure he'll play. He's probably a starter for all I know. Now, I know they named the reserves. LeBron is a reserve. First time he hasn't been voted in as a starter in forever. I guess maybe going back to his rookie year. And I'm not wrapped up in the All-Star game stuff, but that's what you have there with Nikola Jokic as we continue to monitor him and see how well he plays coming back from the knee injury. The second thing I want to talk about is Paul George with this 25-game suspension. Now, I know it's some improper medication that he took for mental health, so this isn't a PED, just violated the anti-drug policy by the association. And what can you say? It's a freakish thing. Not knowing what type of pharmaceutical that he could take, couldn't take, whatever. Obviously, that was one that was banned. He apologized to the team, teammates, everybody, the city of Philly, the fans. So kudos to him. I know he was having a subpar year. He was averaging 16 points a game, although with them in the lineup, they've actually played well. And even though he, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid haven't played a lot together, but having him out will be, I don't want to say significant loss, but it'll be a loss. Obviously plays perimeter defense, still pretty good at his age. Can score. To me, Paul George, I always thought was more of a regular season guy, not really a postseason guy. But Philly has had success this year. They have played well. And for him to sit out 25 games, you just chalk it up to him. I don't want to say it's a bad error of judgment, but maybe him not going in the weeds to say, wait, should I take this? Is this a banned substance on the NBA drug list? Obviously, he didn't do that. And is owning up to it by taking the suspension, which I believe will be back March 25th. Then you have the Knicks, who 2 weeks ago today lost to Dallas at home on Martin Luther King Day. And the sky was falling around MSG. Some of the Knicks fans are saying, we got to get a trade. Get Karl-Anthony Towns out of here. Is Mike Brown really the guy? But where's that gone? Now they've won 6 in a row. And they beat the Lakers there last night as LeBron invades New York here for a couple of days. They'll play the Brooklyn Nets tomorrow. So he'll be in town. You may bump into him in Manhattan somewhere on the street, or even Luka Doncic for that matter. And I'll segue to Doncic in a minute. But as far as the Knicks tied there with the Celtics, I understand it's going to be a battle for a 2 seed, which is important because that 2 seed gets home court in the second round. We saw that last year when the Knicks played the Celtics, and we know about the injury, Jason Tatum, etc. And I talked about the Tatum injury on Thursday's podcast. If you haven't checked it out, you can go back and listen to that. But with the conference the way it shapes up, that is going to be a fight to see who's going to be that second place team. We would think that the Pistons will have the 1 seed when it's all said and done. But right now, the Knicks are in the middle of a 6-game winning streak, and everything is coming up rosy there on 33rd and 8th. So we'll continue to take an eye out for that. And it's interesting because you have Toronto and Cleveland that are right behind them. 3 games in a loss, but 2 games back in the standings. So, in Toronto, of course, they've overachieved and played very well this year. And the Cavs, as they made a trade, we'll see how that fares with them as we move it along in the season. But the other thing I want to bring up is the Luka Doncic trade, because today is the 1-year anniversary, and it's so ironic that the Lakers are in town, because when the trade went down last year, when the Lakers played the Knicks on a Saturday night, which was the ABC Saturday Showcase game, and the Lakers stood in town overnight, where after midnight, the trade broke, Luka going to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. I forgot who else went in that deal. And a number 1 pick, I believe, in 2029, which I know the Dallas fans, that right now, they're probably just cringing at the thought that it's been a year already. And listen, I'm not here to rehash the trade or whatever, but we all know it's just an abysmal trade. And I have to say this. As many times as I talked about it, and I'll even throw this up on the channel today, that has to be the worst trade in sports history. Not NBA history, not basketball history, sports history. And we can break them all down. Herschel Walker going to the Vikings for all those draft picks, including Emmitt Smith. We could talk about the great Frank Robinson for Milt Pappas, traded from the Reds to the Orioles. I mean, there's so many other trades we could talk about. You even want to talk about the Gretzky trade to a certain extent. Now, I understand the Kings never won a cup. They did go to one. And I couldn't even tell you who the cast of characters in that Edmonton trade. I know Marty McSorley went with him, but didn't Luke Robitaille? No, I believe Robitaille was stood in. Yeah, he didn't go to Edmonton in that trade. But yeah, obviously that wasn't a great trade for Edmonton. But this one, by far, hands down, is the worst ever in sports history. And if you don't believe that or want to debate that, just leave a comment in the description. I'll be more than happy to follow up with that. But yeah, as far as the NBA, other than that, what do we have here? Yeah, that's it as far as like the stuff that's happening on the court, games. Now, as far as overall with these standings, talked about Knicks, Celtics, Toronto. Yeah, that's 7 through 10. Listen, what is there to talk about? I will say this. Charlotte has improved. They've played better. Charlotte, who's now won, get ready for this, 6 in a row. The Hornets, yes, that's Charlotte Hornet team. The team that Michael Jordan decided to, I'm going to sell the team, and now they've actually had a little bit of success. What does this mean in the grand scheme of things? Who knows? They need to get more players there. But considering that the Hornets are 1 game back of the 10 seed, the Atlanta Hawks, in the Eastern Conference, are we going to take notice on the Hornets? Which I get when you look at their team. You probably just think, they only have LaMelo Ball and that's it. No, they have Colin Kneppel, who's actually done very well this year, the rookie out of UConn. And when you take a look at their, overall team, that they jump out at you, is it a team that's going to have you go to the sets to watch? No, absolutely not. But you have to think, I said UConn for Kneppel's Duke. I know I had UConn on the brain. He went to Duke, of course, played there with Cooper Flagg. But when you have a situation where, when you look at their roster, let me pull that up real quick. When you look at their roster and you have guys like Brandon Miller, the kid from Arizona, the kid from Alabama. I'm getting all my colleges mixed up. Obviously, you had that issue there in college where there was some controversy whether or not that he should have got drafted where he was. But Brandon Miller, obviously, is their leading scorer. And when you take a look at other guys on their team, I talked about Colin Kneppel, of course. Miles Bridges, who's had his issues off the court as well, but has been a contributor there. Colin Sexton, remember him? The former number 1 overall, bounced around with Cleveland, Utah, etc. So they put forth a team that has actually played well, and we'll have to wait and see on whether or not that they'll gain any traction and maybe sneak into the back door when we get to the middle of April if they're a playoff team. Now, they're going to make any noise, do anything? No, but we'll have to see whether or not that this team can be built for the future. Maybe not along the lines of the Oklahoma City Thunder or the San Antonio Spurs, but hey, you would think that Charlotte's going to have some success here, right? Where they absolutely positively had none, dating back to their days of the Bobcats. I won't go back to the days of the Hornets of Alan Bristow, the coach, and Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Del Curry, etc. But this new iteration, whether it was the Bobcats when they had guys like Emeka Okafor and Steven Jackson was on the team. So here they are now making some hay. Hopefully they can keep it up and watch me jinx them and they'll go plummeting there in the East. Then, of course, OKC, San Antonio, Denver. Lakers have been inconsistent. Remember, Lakers were in that 2 to 4 range, and now they're down to 6 behind, or right in front of the Phoenix Suns, who they have 2 games in hand. Suns are 30-20, Lakers 29-19. But, yeah, that's what you have there. And the Clippers continue to climb towards 500. Golden State, who knows if they're going to trade anybody. Jimmy Butler with an expiring contract with that knee. Jonathan Kuminga, who's also on the shelf. But that's your NBA. And then your schedule here for the early part of the week. Your Peacock games, Minnesota at Memphis and Philly at the Clippers. Ugh. You have that going on. But then you have tomorrow, Denver-Detroit. Very good game. Your NBC game is Boston at Dallas as they try to revisit a finals of NBA finals past 2 years ago. Your nightcap, Phoenix at Portland. Philly at Golden State. Orlando at OKC. Atlanta at Miami. Lakers in Brooklyn, as I mentioned. Knicks in Washington. Yeah, that's pretty much a Tuesday schedule. And then Wednesday, Denver at New York. So you get Nikola Jokic here up close and personal. Are they in Brooklyn, I guess, that week too? Oh, Brooklyn's on the road. They're in Orlando. So let me see. Thursday? No, they're not playing. I thought maybe Denver would do a double dip similar to what the Lakers have done here or are doing. Then you have Boston at Houston, Minnesota, Toronto. Denver, the Knicks is an ESPN game. The nightcap is Oklahoma City, San Antonio. I believe that's the last time they'll meet, where we've seen San Antonio win 3 of the 4 games, but the Thunder have won the last game. And then Cleveland at the Clippers, Memphis, Sacramento. Yeah, that's it before you get to Thursday. All right, now let me shift my attention to the ice to go around there real quick. What's happening there as I lace up the skates. And yesterday you had the Stadium Series, Boston at Tampa, and it was actually rather frigid when you think about it. But you had a lot of fireworks on the ice where you had the goalies. And I don't know what's happening with these goalie fights. 2 weeks ago you had Alex Nedeljkovic, I hope I pronounced that right, the San Jose goalie going up against Sergei Bobrovsky. Certainly did not bring back memories of Felix Potvin and Ron Hextall. And then the same could be said last night where there was a scrum. And then all of a sudden, Jeremy Swayman's coming out of his crease. Andrei Vasilevsky's coming out, and now they're going at it. Now, again, it was not a sight to behold, although you like to see the goalie fights. And at the time, Tampa was down 5-2 in the game. They were actually losing 5-1 to Boston before they came back furiously to tie the game. And then in overtime, David Pastrnak looked like he had a goal, but then I believe there was a slashing call on him. I don't know what happened to the whistle as they got over the blue line. He takes a shot, gets it to the back of the net, but for whatever reason, whether the players didn't hear the whistle, what have you, the goal was nullified. So therefore, it led to a shootout. And who wins the shootout? Tampa. So the Bruins do not get out of Tampa with 2 points. They get out with 1 when I'm sure a lot of the talk was them getting 2 points considering they had the game-winning goal in overtime, but that wasn't to be the case. But you had cool, very cold temperatures for Florida. I believe the game time temperature, let me pull that up. Does it have that here? Yeah, sparked a historic Stadium Series comeback. Yeah, we know about that. All I know is that the game time at start, and it had 65,000 there, was, I believe it was about 41 degrees, but the wind chill felt like it was in the 30s. And by the time the game ended, I'm sure it was already in the 30s as far as the temperature and then the wind chill. So unlike a month before where you had the Winter Classic down there in Miami, you did not have a scenario where the roof was open, but it was 60 degrees, where here in Tampa, obviously it's been cold, and we had this cold front pretty much throughout the eastern seaboard, northeast, midwest, etc. And now here it is. You had the game, and the funny thing about the scrum, as Swayman went over to start the jab, that was during a power play. So you see Swayman go out there making jabs, that there was a scrum in the crease, and then Swayman comes out of the net. When you saw that, you're like, oh, wait a minute. And then you also had another hockey fight, I believe it was in the minor leagues, or maybe just in another league altogether where the goalies were fighting. So, I don't know. Are goalie fights now in vogue in the NHL? Can we bring it back to Hextall and Potvin? Now those, I mean, the sport then was a different breed. The NHL is not like that. So, yeah, as a guy who loves the fight game, as a guy who loves hockey fights, but we all know the players of this generation, this day and age, aren't anywhere close. And that is, by all means, no disrespect to the Matthew Oliviers, to the Ryan Rempe's of the world, to the Curtis McDermott's, the Nicholas Deloriers, to those guys. There's only a handful of guys that are true tough guys. Matt Rempe, I got to throw him in there. Besides that, I mean, come on. Who are we kidding here? I'll just leave it at that. But with the NHL, you also had Patrick Kane. I talked about this on Thursday, but he surpassed Mike Modano for the most points by a U.S.-born player, 1375. And Modano even had a congratulatory message on the big screen there. That was against the Capitals. So congratulations to Patrick Kane, who after this is next stop. And the Red Wings having a big year, so who knows if they're going to have a big postseason. That will, of course, have to wait and see. And then, yeah, Chris Letang, the longtime defenseman of the Penguins, he's out with a broken foot over the next 4 weeks. And the Penguins, of course, have been very competitive in the Metropolitan, second place. Them and the Islanders have been battling it out. And as I pull up my standings just to kind of see where we're at, because remember, the Olympic break is forthcoming. Thursday will be the last string of games before we get to the Olympic Games. And then we won't see NHL hockey until the end of the month. So keep that in mind as we pretty much start to make the turn for the Sports Dead Zone Part 1 already. I remember the Sports Dead Zone Part 2 finishing, thinking like, all right, college football, NFL late August, and now here we are already in February, and and it's going to be a slow month. I'll talk about that when we get to next Monday's podcast. But Tampa, 3 games in hand, but a 4-point lead over the Red Wings in the Atlantic. Montreal and Boston separated by a point, 69-68, and then the Sabres separated by a point from them. And you got to wonder about Florida here. Florida now 59 points, outside looking in, and that'll in February. Let's see the wild card picture. Florida is currently, now it's not insurmountable. They're 8 points behind the Sabres for the last spot. We know the Sabres haven't made it to the postseason since 2010-11. So, their fans are chomping at the bit to get to a playoff. But looking at it here, the Panthers could be in danger of missing the playoffs. I'm not going to write them off just yet, but they've already played almost 2/3 of their season. Yeah, 54? They're just right about there. And you have to wait and see. Same for the Maple Leafs. Maple Leafs looking bad. And who would have ever thought that the Rangers would be literally in last place in the conference? But as it is right now, Tampa, Detroit, Montreal, your top 3 in the Atlantic. Carolina, Pittsburgh, Islanders. Islanders are 2 points behind them. You want to get the 2 seed because that means at least you're hosting the opening round. And even with Letang out, Penguins have now won 6 in a row, so look out for them. Bruins have the top wildcard spot, and the Sabres the second one. Blue Jackets and Capitals are both 6 points behind the Sabres for the final playoff spot, and then you have the Panthers, of course, as well as the Senators at 59. And Maple Leafs. Wow, so all 3 of those teams. Out west, we know about Colorado. Now 7 points ahead of Minnesota. Dallas has played well. 1 point behind the Wild. There in the Central, Vegas, 64 points. Tied with Edmonton there at the top. And Vegas have hit the skids here, losing 5 in a row. Seattle's now won 4 in a row to where they're 3 points behind both Edmonton and Vegas, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Anaheim, and the Kings separated by a point. And then you have Kings who have the second playoff spot. Utah, 60 points. Although tied, but on the outside looking in. San Jose, 58. Nashville, 56. Then it falls off from there. Winnipeg, Chicago, 51. Then Calgary, and that's what you have. So, and I'll talk about more of a first half for the NHL on on Thursday's podcast. As far as the schedule for the week, tonight, Buffalo, Florida, Ottawa, Pittsburgh, New York, Washington, Montreal, Minnesota, St. Louis, Nashville, San Jose, Chicago, Winnipeg, Dallas, Detroit, Colorado. That's a home and home, by the way, because they played on Saturday in Detroit. And that's it for there. Tuesday, Columbus at New Jersey, Washington, Philly, Buffalo at Tampa. Then Toronto at Edmonton, Pittsburgh at New York. That's a big game there on Tuesday night. And then Wednesday, Boston at Florida, TNT. St. Louis at Dallas, also on TNT. Is there an ESPN game? Oh, 2 TNT games on Tuesday. Tomorrow, Pittsburgh and New York, Seattle at Anaheim. And then, that is pretty much it. Because the other games, San Jose, Colorado, Minnesota, Nashville, Edmonton, Calgary, the Battle of Alberta, Vancouver, Vegas, Seattle and the Kings. And that will do it for your NHL schedule. I can talk about Thursday's games, but we're going to reconnect on Thursday, so I'll talk about that then. And then finally, with the baseballs, I get into the batter's box before we wrap up. Pitchers and catchers report a week from tomorrow. We shall all rejoice. But as far as some signings that have taken place, Giants made a couple moves. Luis Arias on a one-year deal. Decent infield between he, Matt Chapman, Willie Adames, and if he does play first base, none other than Rafael Devers. They also signed Harrison Bader for insurance in the outfield. It may start, but he's a good guy to come off the bench. The Reds signed Eugenio Suarez. And I don't know what it is about Suarez. He is in Seattle, Cincinnati, or Arizona. And now he signs a one-year deal with the Reds. I'm sure that was unfavorable. I would think that he was expecting a long-term deal. Now he's, 35 years of age. But 1 for 15, which will help out the Reds as they try to get back to the playoffs and have more success than they did last year, getting swept by the Dodgers in the wildcard round. The White Sox pick up Jordan Hicks and David Sandlin from the Red Sox. So they'll add some more pitching depth to that rotation. And then am I seeing that right? Oh yeah, they also add Austin Hayes, the former Oriole, Philly. He's bounced around here a lot over the last couple of years. So they bring a veteran bat there to the South Side Chicago. The Mets sign Austin Barnes, catcher, last year with the Dodgers, and Craig Kimbrell, you know him, guys, the former Brave, but he's bounced around on a million teams. Both signed a minor league contracts with an opportunity to be a part of the big club. I'm not a Kimbrell fan. Long in the tooth. He has been just awful here over these last few years. He is the last guy I want to see in that Met bullpen. Maybe they use him for mop-up. I didn't even want the perish the thought. But those are the two recent signings there. And then the A's signed their shortstop Jacob Wilson to a 7-year, $70 million deal to go along with Lawrence Butler, to go along with Tyler Soderstrom, to go along with the Brent Rookers of the world. Remember, they signed Luis Severino to a 3-year, $69 million contract last year. So the A's are keeping their young players, which is great. You want to see that? I'm sure they're going to be targeted to go to Vegas, probably in 2028. And considering that now these players, Soderstrom, Rooker, Butler, now Wilson, are all tied in through at least the year 2030. So that's good for the former Oakland A's or Sacramento A's fan now that they have a team that's going to be cohesive, that's young, that's trying to build for the future and maybe even win a championship at some point. So excellent moves on those parts. And let me see. Nothing else besides that. Yeah, that is it. You got nothing else as far as the baseball stuff. As I mentioned, a week from this coming Thursday, camps will open. And that will do it, people. What can I tell you? I'm just over here looking to make sure I didn't miss anything. Another episode, just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about the Detroit Department of Life called Sports. And one more time, if you haven't done so, please subscribe on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Also, Apple, Spotify podcast for those who are the audio file like. And please, write a review, throw me a few stars. I would sincerely appreciate it, as I'll go a long way to increasing the visibility of this podcast with all the others that are out there, especially there on YouTube. And if you have a question, comment, suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or Instagram, just JAYREELZ. On Twitter, JAYREELZ1 just a number. Twitch, JAYREELZ1 just a number. Or the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with any questions, comments, or suggestions, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. Talking sports is birth. That's right. And if you love sports content, like it, gotta have it, can't get enough of it, this is the channel, this is the podcast for you. No clickbait, no rage bait, made by a sports fan for you guys and gals and sports fans, because as long as I'm alive and breathing in front of this camera and microphone, I promise I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South East, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the foot, baby.